subscribe to my sister's channel. She will also voice her favorite plots. Let's give her a big asset. The Great Shinobi War sounds, huh? What do you think, Kurama? In fact, when you are standing on the battlefield and many lives depend on you, only I can come up with such nonsense. Oh yeah, I didn't introduce myself, where are my manners? You've never had them, snorted my personal schizophrenia, or rather, the great and terrible nine-tailed demon fox, Kubi no Yokuwell, or just Kurama, habitually ignoring his joke, because there are not enough nerves for everything. I will continue. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. As you might have guessed, I am the Jinchuriki of this hairy infection, the very infection. The fox growled resentfully, and we have the Fourth World War going on. The fight with Madara will not be easy. I realized that right away, but I never thought that it would turn into such a nightmare. My personal nightmare. It all happened in the middle of a battle. The battle took place on the ruins of Konoha. The sound of weapons could be heard here and there, and the smell of blood and ashes hovered around. That I had been fighting Madara for several hours now, and although Kurama helped as much as he could, but the fox's strength is not limitless, it was urgent to come up with something. And having created shadow clones, I decided to surround him and strike a decisive blow. You're going to die, I shouted, simultaneously gathering the remnants of the chakra into a fist, and swinging for a blow. I don't think so, he drawled mockingly, and before I knew what it meant, he disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Careful, was all the fox managed to roar. And at the same moment, with a loud poof, all my clones disappeared, and hundreds of shurikens flew at me. I understood that I would not have time to leave, and even the fox's chakra would not be able to help me. Therefore, closing my eyes and mentally saying goodbye to everyone, I began to wait for my death. Seconds passed, and still there was no pain. In surprise, opening my eyes, I saw in front of me such a familiar face. These silvery hair, a mask covering most of the face, and eyes, one is black as night, and the second is now not hidden by the tread of the leaf, sparkling with the redness of Sharingan. It was Kakashi Hatake, also known as the Copying Ninja Konoha, my sensei, friend, and just a native person for me. When he saw that I was looking, he forced a smile at me with his smile eye and began to sink to the ground. It was only then that I realized that he had covered me with his own body. Why? Sensei Kakashi, why did you do that? I cried out hysterically, grabbing him and gently lowering him to the ground. Yes, because, he hesitantly drawled, because I, and probably decided something for myself, already finished with confidence, I love you and everything. The whole world has turned upside down for me. In an instant, memories surfaced before my eyes, our first acquaintance, tasks with bells, a mission in the land of waves, an exam for Chunin, and then Sasuke's departure from the village and the first tantrum in many years, which ended in his hands, and then training with the element of wind, creating a Rasen Shuriken, battles with Akatsuki members, various missions with an updated team, and many other memories in which he was always there. After his confession, it was like I had an epiphany. All those emotions and feelings that I had hidden even from myself came out. And now, remembering all this, I realized one thing, I love you too, I whispered back. And leaning towards him, at the same time removing the mask, kissed him. It was a light, gentle kiss, to which he immediately responded. His lips were soft and warm, and the kiss tasted of blood. Gradually it turned into a passionate one. We desperately clung to each other, trying to show all those feelings that had accumulated over the years. The air stopped being enough, and with regret I had to interrupt the kiss. Emotions overwhelmed me. I did not notice how tears poured out of my eyes. And only his voice brought me back to reality. Don't cry, Naru, you shouldn't cry, he said, gently wiping away my tears. Smile, because a smile suits you so well, sunshine, overcoming the pain, the man finished. My personal son, and closed his eyes forever. I watched him slowly die and couldn't do anything. The wounds are too deep and even the Karama chakra is useless here. From despair, I fell into a real hysteria. Only one thought, revenge, was beating in my head. And I knew how to implement it. Are you sure, Neru? After all, using this technique you will die. The fox asked with concern in his voice. I will take revenge even if it costs me my life. Won't you change your mind? He made another attempt to dissuade me. But I realized the futility of this idea, only sighed heavily. Are you with me? I drawled hopefully, adding more pleading in my voice. Where will I go? He muttered softly in my subconscious, and added louder, let's show them what we're worth. And in the next moment, I was enveloped in a veil of chakra. The eyes turned from blue to red, with vertical pupils. My stripes, the scars on my cheeks, have become clearer and darker. The hair rose and split into 9 strands, displaying tails. Fangs and claws appeared. And the killer, Ki, smelled like a kilometer. It was the Biju regime in all its glory. Turning on my sensory abilities, I began scanning the area in search of Madara. Finding a familiar chakra nearby, I ran in this direction. As it turned out, he was on the Hokage rock. He stood quietly and looked at the chaos that was happening around him. This picture made me even more angry. Calm down, Naruto, the fox shouted at me, you need to concentrate now, we won't have a second chance. You're right, Ku, I'm sorry, sighing heavily, and gathering herself, she continued, well, are you ready? And without waiting for an answer, she began to fold the seals. Concentrating on the wind chakra, I began to accumulate it in my body. What I had in mind was pure madness, but I couldn't do it any other way. From the amount of chakra inside, the body began to burn unbearably. I literally felt the channels tearing, and the power overflowing every cell. A strong wind rose around me and only then I was noticed. But it was too late, I had already finished the technique, Vital Jutsu, the wind of death. I shouted and ran straight at him. The principle of the technique is similar to Rasengan, only the chakra is not collected in a ball, but is released with the whole body. Therefore, it is impossible to survive after this. And I can only watch as my end approaches. But I will take the enemy with me and I will be able to take revenge. In those seconds, I was able to realize that I had been looking for approval and love all my life. And it was only just before her death that she was able to understand that she was always there, if it were possible to fix everything. A thought slipped through, but I immediately rejected it. After all, my life doesn't make sense without Kakashi. Fix it, you say? The last thing I heard, and then a blow, and darkness, darkness, she surrounded me from all sides. I can't say how long I've been here. Maybe a minute or an hour, a day. But everything will end sooner or later. So I woke up, from the sun beating on my eyes. Stop. The sun. From the realization, I abruptly opened my eyes and tried to sit up. My whole body ached, as if Chidori had walked over me. I struggled to my feet, but something was wrong. The world seemed to become more. What is going on here, Dadabayo? I shouted angrily. Don't yell, Neru, better come down to me. A tired voice sounded in my head. Without arguing, I immediately concentrated, and a minute later I saw a cage in front of me. Inside, as once, sat a severely emaciated fox. What happened, Ku? I asked, walking inside the cage. The fact is that before I died in that world, I heard your request. Well, the fox drawled hesitantly, I moved us to another world. And ahead of your question, by us, I meant your favorite sensei. Is Kakashi here too? I whispered in disbelief, but then it dawned on me. Another world? You'll understand now, that's all he said, and then the memories of this body came crashing down on me. In a few seconds, I literally lived the life of a local Naruto. And what I saw did not please me at all. To begin with, my parents are alive here, and I even have a younger sister, Mina. But the advantages ended there, because the girl, despite having a family, was lonely. She was modest and quiet, so she was often overlooked. Mina was considered a genius. She had already graduated from the academy at the age of 14, and this was a frequent reason for ridicule of her older sister. After all, because of the fox inside, Naruto could not perform even the most ordinary technique correctly. And then the father began to be ashamed, considering her weak, and the mother could only pity the little Jinchuriki. She became an outcast, and only Hinata and her godparents did not turn away from her. The first was the best friend. She understood Naruto like no one else. The soft and timid Hinata was an outcast among the Hyugas. But despite everything, she found an approach to the soul of little Naru, and soon replaced her sister. The second are her favorite godparents. Point one was expected to be Jiraiya. He traveled like in that world, so he could rarely see his goddaughter, but he was still ready to help at any moment. But the personality of the second caused me a shock. It was Orochimaru. As I understood from my memories, this snake never left Konoha. Moreover, he doted on Nara, and perceived her as nothing but his own daughter. And now I'm here, the complete opposite of the local Naruto, and I have only one question: what am I going to do with all this, Ku? I drawled with the look of a martyr, having already imagined future problems. And nothing, the fox shrugged his shoulders calmly, and looking at my eyes widened with shock, he explained, your chakra is with you, the body itself will soon adjust to such a large volume of chakra, so don't be surprised if you start to grow quickly, but otherwise you only need to train. Yes, and I will help. I have already fixed the chakra canals for you, it remains only to expand them, but training will also help you with this. Thank you, Ku. And in gratitude, I gently stroked his soft fur. What would I do without you? Get out of here already, the fox rumbled confusedly. You still have a distribution for teams today, don't be late. Exactly. There will also be Kakashi. Well, then I ran, bye-bye. Waving goodbye to him, I quickly retreated from the subconscious. Wait for the academy. The new Naruto Uzumaki will still show what it's worth. Databayo, coming out of the subconscious, I decided to look around first. It was just like in the memories, a small bright room with a large bed and a full-length window. Opposite the bed there is a work desk, and in the corner there is a wardrobe. That's where I went. I opened the wardrobe of the local Naruto, and immediately involuntarily wince. From the abundance of gray, I have a ripple in my eyes. Digging into my memory, I was able to find a large box in the farthest corner. It was there, if you believe the memories, that the girl put all the more or less bright things. And really, opening the box, I was pleasantly surprised to find among the colorful things, so similar to my former orange jumpsuit. Without hesitation, I immediately put it on. After putting myself in order and making my favorite ponytails, I decided to go downstairs without wasting any more time. I didn't want to see my family right now. And I wasn't mentally ready for it. Therefore, stepping as quietly as possible, I hurried out the door. The academy, she hasn't changed much. The same building, playground, and even the swing on the tree remained the same. As if all these years had never happened, as if I had returned home? That's how nostalgic. I didn't notice how I reached the audience. I must say my arrival made a splash. A quiet and modest Naruto in the past, she stumbled inside, almost opening the door with a kick. I would have had a shock too. Silence formed, and if it wasn't for Iruka-sensei, I don't know how it would have ended. He also looked at me in surprise, but quickly pulled himself together, after all, an adult shinobi, and allowed me to sit in my seat. That I must say the distribution of teams went as in the past. I was back in team number 7, and now I was looking forward to the arrival of Kakashi-sensei. He was late as always, and I was just jumping on the chair out of impatience. Although Kurama said that he had brought him into this world, but I wanted to personally make sure that this was my Kakashi. And less than an hour later, the door to the auditorium opens, and he stands on the threshold. From the sight of Kakashi alive and unharmed, the heart begins to beat madly, and tears come to my eyes. I want to rush to hug him, and never let him go again. But first you need to check everything. And I say a phrase because of which he will definitely understand that it's me, lost on the road of life, Sensei Kakashi. Looking straight into his eyes, I say, and the reaction did not take long to wait. After a second a lot of emotions slip on his face: recognition, disbelief, hope, happiness, and finally boundless love. Neru, is that you? He whispers uncertainly, taking a step towards me, and I couldn't answer, I could only nod. And then the whole world seemed to stop. After all, the next second, I felt such a familiar embrace. Strong hands of shinobi, hugged gently, but firmly, afraid to hurt me. Hugging him back, I buried my nose in his neck, inhaling such a native smell. I finally felt at home. It's you, there was an anguished whisper somewhere in the area of the crown. Then, pulling back a little, he leaned his forehead against mine, looking straight into my eyes. My Neru, yours, only yours. Before I could finish, we were attracted by some noise. As much as I would not want this moment to last forever, but everything will end sooner or later. So this time, we were interrupted by other team members, about whom we safely managed to forget. Or rather, Sakura fell off the desk she was sitting on, no other than from shock, dragging an equally shocked Sasuke with her. Emma, I'm waiting for everyone on the roof, we'll meet there, this one said. This bug, after sending me an apologetic look, took off in a whirlwind of Shunshin, leaving me to deal with the team. What was that just now? Sakura, who had recovered from the shock, asked me, to Sasuke's consonant chorus, that it was our new sensei. As an indisputable fact, I said, pretending that I did not understand the essence of the question. Come on, they're waiting for us, Dadabayo. And without giving them anything more to say, I hurried off to the roof. On the roof, Kakashi was already waiting for me, happy, like a cat full of sour cream. He also messed up and smiles. I was about to start being indignant when he bent down and took off his mask for a moment, lightly kissed me. And before I could answer, he pulled away, finally whispering, "We'll talk later." As soon as he pulled on the mask, footsteps were heard behind him. An overexcited Sakura and an even more irritated Sasuke came out on the platform. It was obvious that the pink-haired one had managed to get it specifically on the way to the roof. Well, let's get acquainted. As soon as we sat down, Sensei suggested. I'll give you an example. My name is Kakashi Hatake. I am 26 years old. What I like and don't like doesn't concern you, my tastes are not interesting to you, but my dream, make one girl happy. At the last words, he shot his eyes in my direction. And now you. He nodded at Sakura. My name is Haruno Sakura. What I love. More precisely, whom I love. At her words, Haruno blushed and looked at Uchiha. My cherished dream is, and again a glance at Uchiha. Everything is clear here, and now you, Sensei pointed at Sasuke. I'm Sasuke Uchiha. I love tomatoes and workouts, but I don't like a lot of things. My dream. Surpass Itachi, and become a worthy shinobi. Yes, you did not hear it, the same Itachi. The fact is that the Uchi clan is alive and well here and thriving. With the support of the Fourth, they refused the coup. And as a result, Itachi did not have to cut out the clan, respectively, he did not become a nuke nin, but is the best Anbu guard of the Hokage. Something like that. And I was really happy for Sasuke. After all, even here, he will have a family. Interrupting my thoughts, I hurried to introduce myself without waiting for the cue. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I love ramen and, one person, I look unequivocally in the direction of Kakashi. I don't like to lose. And I dream of a family, and that I would be recognized. Ahem, well. Hatake interrupted the silence that had been prolonged after my words. Before you start completing tasks, you will be tested. Come to the 10th training ground tomorrow at 6 in the morning. Don't be late. But when he saw my skeptical look, he faded away, and finished more quietly, I advise you not to eat anything. And now you are free. As soon as the last words were spoken, Sasuke was already gone. Sakura hesitated a little, said goodbye and also rushed off after the brunette. Her cry, "Wait for me Sasuke-kun," probably heard the whole village. And so we were left alone. Kakashi hurried to take me in his arms again. I felt good and calm in his arms, but I understood that soon we would have a serious conversation. And as if reading my thoughts, he asked, "Well, shall we talk here?" I answered the question with a question. And deciding to pull a little more time, she suggested, "Can we go to Ichiraku first? I haven't eaten since this morning." And as a confirmation, my stomach rumbled. It is worth saying that the man immediately saw through me. It was not for nothing that he was my sensei for so long, but under my plaintive gaze he soon gave up. I wanted to jump already, from my little victory. How he immediately broke me off, but no ramen naru. And seeing my skeptical look, he added, "I'm serious, stop eating this stuff. Let's go to the store, I'll buy groceries, and I'll cook something for us." Will you cook it yourself?" I whispered in disbelief, and added more quietly, at home?" After receiving his hesitant nod, I screamed and threw my arms around his neck. And to the shocked look she explained, "No one has ever cooked for me," I said, a little embarrassed. "It will be now," Hatake promised, kissing me on the forehead through the mask. "Well, let's go, Dadabayo." And without waiting for an answer, she pulled him to the exit. Kakashi just rolled his eyes in resignation. Following his beloved, the shopping trip turned out to be successful. We really decided not to advertise our relationship yet. They won't understand. Although I have an adult consciousness, but my body is only 15 years old. But that's not the point now. Shopping with Kakashi was fun. Every time he was distracted by something, I tried to buy at least a pack of custard ramen. And I think it's not worth saying that I was caught every time. And so on the 5th, when I, with the stubbornness of a true Uzumaki, found myself near a shelf with ramen, Kakashi decided to take a desperate step. We'll agree. In the end, we agreed that if I got at least one bell tomorrow, he would feed me ramen for a week. And only after that we quietly finished shopping and went to his house. To be honest, in the past, I have never been to Kakashi's apartment. I don't know what I expected, but it turned out to be an ordinary 2-room apartment. A small but bright kitchen, in white tones, the same living room, and only in the bedroom, despite the large window, there was semi-darkness. While I was looking around, I heard a noise from the kitchen. Entering there, an amazing picture opened up to my eyes. Kakashi, without a mask, dressed in simple trousers and a blue t-shirt, was stirring something on the stove with concentration. In his house clothes, with disheveled hair, he looked so cute that I just couldn't help smiling. When he saw me, he immediately smiled back without looking up from his work. Trying not to interfere, because I'm a complete zero in cooking, I sat down on a chair and began to quietly observe. the dinner itself was held in cozy silence. Everything was very tasty. Kakashi was really good at cooking. But then, it's time to talk. Having settled in the living room, with a cup of hot tea and his support, I began my story. She told me everything that happened after his death, the fight with Madara, the transition to another world, the memories of the local Naruto, and even the conversation with Kurama retold almost verbatim. I don't remember exactly when I started crying, and how he hugged me in an attempt to calm me down. I don't remember how I ended up on his lap either. I only know that Kakashi did not let me go, and I fell asleep in his arms. My last thought was, I'm finally home. When I woke up in a strange bed in the morning, I did not immediately understand where I was. But remembering yesterday, a happy smile appeared on my face. Carefully extricating myself from the embrace of the still sleeping Kakashi, I quietly, so as not to wake up, went to the kitchen. I wanted to surprise him somehow, and I decided to try to cook breakfast. Nothing complicated, probably. And so, from the fifth attempt to fry ordinary eggs, the snide voice of a fox sounded in my head, "Good morning, Naru. I see you didn't waste any time without me. Shopping center, fox face, and good morning to you." Throwing out another portion of burnt eggs, I grumbled. After all, cooking is not my thing. Did you finally get enough sleep? When can we start training? Yes, even now, only. The fox stopped on the floor of the word, as if listening. Oh. I won't bother you. This demon laughed nastily, and dumped out of the subconscious. While I was talking to Ku, I didn't notice how I managed to cook a quite tolerable breakfast. And now she froze in front of the teapot, probably deciding to make tea, and tried to understand what this fox meant. But they didn't give me much time to think. After all, in the next second, strong male hands hugged me around the waist, pressing my back to my chest, and a sleepy voice with a slight hoarseness was heard above my head, "Good morning, son." Then I felt a light kiss on the cheek. How delicious it smells. Then sit down to eat. Without tormenting him, she pointed to the table. And I'll run, it's almost 6. And Kakashi, getting your attention, I'm done, don't be too late. And without waiting for an answer, she smiled, jumping out of the window. When I arrived at the training ground, my teammates were already there. Sasuke stood with his arms crossed over his chest, and silently ignored Sakura flitting in front of him. Such a familiar picture caused an attack of nostalgia, and raised an already excellent mood. Hello everyone, Dadabayo. I came up to them and greeted them. At the sight of me, Sasuke just chuckled, but Sakura was probably just waiting for someone to snap at "You're late." Only a deaf person would not have heard her scream. Unfortunately, I wasn't like that. Just as I was about to answer her, she continued, "Why are you late? We were clearly told to come at 6. Sasuke-kun and I have been waiting for half an hour." And already quieter, she added breathlessly. "Yes, Sasuke-kun." The brunette chose not to answer, only continued to stand with his eyes closed. He seemed to have fallen asleep altogether. From ignoring her undoubtedly beautiful, as she thought, persona, Sakura got even more angry. If it's possible, of course. And I was about to continue my tirade, when Kurama's voice was heard in my subconscious, "Shut that fool Naru up. Or I'll shut her up myself," the fox growled, clearly not satisfied, and then added slyly, "Come on as you can." "Net, I know that intonation." "No way." I immediately protested. "Well, what does Naru cost you?" The fox whined. And seeing my hesitation, I decided to finish off, "And I will help you for this. For example, with bells, what did you bet on there by the way?" "Week of ramen. Well, do you agree?" Already knowing my answer and mentally rubbing his paws with anticipation, this demon stretched out. And he knew what to put pressure on. Fox Face persuaded me. I agreed resignedly. Watch and enjoy, Databayo. In reality, at this time Sakura continued to read me another lecture, which I decisively cut off. Did you ask why I was late, Sakura-chan? And lowering her voice to a whisper, as if she was going to tell a big secret, forcing even Sasuke to open his eyes with interest, she continued, I just overslept. To the accompaniment of the fox's wild laughter in my head, I stood in front of Sakura with a serious face and tried not to laugh. And there was a reason. After all, now she looked more like a beached fish that gasps for air. But I'm not done yet. Okay. Raising my hands in a gesture of reconciliation, I continued with the most honest expressions on my face. Actually, I didn't oversleep, I just cooked breakfast for our sensei for a long time. Not for nothing they say, if you want to lie, tell the truth. So this time it worked. Sakura turned pale at first, then blushed in the end. She only frowned even more and turned away resentfully. But Sasuke realized that I was just mocking him, and now he was just enjoying the spectacle. Realizing that nothing more could be achieved from Sakura, he closed his eyes again. There was silence, which was interrupted by Kakashi appearing. Sakura immediately perked up, finding a new object for notation. And as if to confirm my thoughts, she shouted, You're late. What do you say that you also cooked her breakfast? At these words, she did not point a cultured finger at me. To say that Kakashi was taken aback means to say nothing. Perhaps this explains his next words, breakfast? No, I was cooking us dinner. He replied, confused. At these words, I could not resist and still made the famous hand-face gesture. The fox neighed again, muttered at the same time, and I already like him. After looking at me, it only then dawned on the man that he blurted out, but apparently deciding that we had already burned down and there was no point in hiding in front of the team, he openly continued, by the way, for breakfast, it was very tasty. Thanks to Naru. He came up to me and kissed me gently on the cheek. And apparently this was the last straw for Sakura's nerves. After all, the next second she fell unconscious. Sasuke only sighed heavily at the actions of his teammate, and tried to hide his own blush. That's what I understand, I knocked him down. The fox whistled with a share of respect, and for the first time I was ready to agree. Having brought Sakura to consciousness, we were immediately rushed to announce the task. It was just like that time, we need to get the bells before lunch. But I already knew what the catch was. Therefore, as soon as Sensei gave the signal to start, I created shadow clones, sent them in search of Sakura and Sasuke, and ran to hide myself. Finding them pretty quickly, I hurried to lay out my plan. After all, only by working in a team, we will be able to defeat Kakashi. Jonin himself at this time, stood quietly and read his vulgar book. So it might seem at first glance. In fact, standing in a specially careless pose, he was watching the situation warily at this time. After all, he knew what his cunning fox was capable of. And not in vain strained. In the next second, a huge fireball flew at him. It was Sasuke, acting according to my plan, who launched the attack. At that time, I was collecting chakra for one spontaneous technique. In that world, I could do it literally in seconds, but here the body is too unprepared, it will be necessary to start training sooner. And so, the forces have already accumulated enough, so giving a sign to Sasuke to stop, I myself jumped out into the clearing. After catching Kakashi's surprised look, I started the fight in pure taijutsu. But, as expected, it did not last long. Soon the man was already pressing me to his chest, and the kunai blade froze at his throat. And that's all, Naru? I expected more, you said thoughtfully. And you don't need more, Kakashi. After all, you've been caught for a long time. And catching a blank look in response, she hurried to explain, "Look at the belt, the bells are no longer there. When you looked down and saw that I was telling the truth, you just asked, where?" And as if answering your question, Sakura came out of the bushes holding those bells in her hands. A moment later, Sasuke dropped down beside her. And everything was obscenely simple. While Sasuke was distracting Sensei, I was tuning into the wind element. Having accumulated a sufficient amount of elemental chakra, I hurried to take the fight. I needed to get pretty close to him, and Taijutsu helped me with that. Catching the moment when it was open, I cut down the bells with the help of a light wind, sending them to the nearest bushes. Sakura picked them up there. But even such an easy jutsu was not easy for me. And if it wasn't for Kurama, who, as promised, helped me, I'd collapse from exhaustion right now. My thoughts were interrupted by Kakashi. "I take it you're a team?" And seeing the confident nods, he proclaimed, "Well, then congratulations, you have passed my tests. I am waiting for you tomorrow morning at the Hokage residence. We will carry out the first mission. And now you are free." After waiting for everyone to disperse and we would be alone, you slyly squinted one visible eye and hurried to ask, "Tell Naru, did you tell them the essence of the task?" To these statements, I just made honest eyes, and shrugged my shoulders sweetly. You only sighed heavily at my behavior like that. But I hurried to change the subject. "Where are you going now, to the Hokage?" I asked curiously. "Yes, you need to submit a report." Kakashi drawled in a kind of doom. And then he asked, "And you, home?" But when he saw how tense I was from his words, he hurried to calm me down. "Don't be afraid of Naru," taking me in his arms, and quietly whispered in my ear, "Well, do you want me to come in the evening?" "I want to," I said petulantly. "Then wait, just don't close the window." And kissed me on the forehead, finally disappeared in a whirlwind of Shunshin. I just laughed at this statement, because Kakashi is not Kakashi if he walks through the doors. And in high spirits I went home. Well, family, wait. The new Naruto is coming. Databeo. When I got home, I found one Kushina. Judging by the sounds, she was cooking something in the kitchen. That's where I went. Once inside, I decided to get her attention. "Stop being a gray mouse, let them get used to the new meat." "Hi Mom." On the last word, my voice visibly shuddered, and tears welled up in my eyes, but I finished with confidence, "I'm home, Databeo." Looking up at me, a shock appeared on the woman's face. And there were hundreds of emotions splashing in his eyes. Well, I can understand her. Your quiet, modest daughter, who was afraid to smile once again, is now standing in the middle of the kitchen and pressing her forehead on all 32, as Kurama likes to say. "And Naruto?" Somehow she asked uncertainly, looking at me with all her eyes. I could only nod at this, and then decided to translate the topic. "Did you cook something? Let me help you," I shouted enthusiastically. "Do you want to learn how to cook?" She whispered incredulously, but I pretended not to hear, continued, "I really don't know how to cook, and I don't want to interfere." But my monologue was decisively interrupted. With a loud squeak, as if she was not an adult woman, but a child who had received a long-awaited gift, I was wrapped in a suffocating embrace. For a couple of seconds, being in a stupor, I hesitantly hugged back. "I couldn't understand what came over you, but I was undoubtedly happy to have the opportunity to establish a relationship." And as if reading my thoughts, she hurried to explain, "I love cooking so much, and when I had girls, I dreamed of teaching you how to cook. Only, time passed, and you didn't show any desire. And here you are today." After a pause, Mom slyly squinted, confessed to Naru, "Have you got a boy? Is that why you want to learn how to cook?" What would surprise him? From such questions, I fell into a precipitate. And thinking about the boy, I almost laughed out loud. Yeah, boy. Not knowing how to answer such questions, I just awkwardly shrugged my shoulders, trying to hide a slight blush. At my actions, Ka-chan just laughed out loud, and pulling away, rubbing her hands in anticipation, offered, "Well, shall we start?" I just nodded resignedly at that. And somewhere in the Hokage's office, an unsuspecting Kakashi hiccuped. "Well, what can I say? Learning to cook from Kushina, it was almost more difficult to fight with Madara. For every mistake, I got a poke and an explanation. But despite this, we had a good time, and I was even able to learn a lot, and here's the last dish in the oven. It's time for me to clean up." After going into the shower and taking off my dirty overalls, I was finally able to relax. 30 minutes later, when I was clean and dressed, this time in a white t-shirt with the Whirlpool logo on the back and red shorts, I went downstairs. There was a surprise waiting for me. The whole family is here. My father and Mina were obviously talking about something, but when they saw me they immediately fell silent. Silence fell. To defuse the situation, Kushina decided, "Well, what are we standing for? Dinner is ready, let's go." And then winking at me, and cunningly finished, "Naruto helped me cook, you should try it," and we all went to the kitchen. The dinner itself was held in silence, which made me a little tense. Only sometimes I caught my father looking at me strangely. After finishing dinner, we all moved into the living room, and that's when the conversation began. My father spoke first. "Naruto, I heard from Kakashi that you passed the tests today. It's true?" Seriously and with some tension he asked me. So that's the thing. He's worried about my strength level. Can't believe that his incompetent daughter, as he says, is able to stand up for herself? Well, break it off. I'm not the Naruto you know. You'll have to get used to it. After all, I'm not going to change. Of course it's true, Dadabayo. As joyfully as possible, I shouted, flashing my trademark smile. Then you're good. And for the first time in many years his gaze turned to me, I saw approval. The man even smiled slightly. But then he added more sternly, just don't get conceited, and don't forget to listen to your sensei. Hi. I raised my hand, and standing at attention, I shouted. Well then, you can go to bed, you have your first mission tomorrow. Yes, and I'm already going, I'm tired. And patting me on the head, he already said to everyone, good night. Good night. After kissing my mother on the cheek, and nodding to Mina, I also went into the room, but in fact, I didn't think to sleep. After all, I have to have another guest. Going into my bedroom, the first thing I did was open the window. Then she sat down on the bed and waited for the arrival of her beloved man. An hour passed, maybe more. I even managed to doze off a little when a familiar silhouette finally appeared in the room. Immediately opening my eyes, I hurried to get into Kakashi's loving embrace. Pulling back a little to see his face, I reached for the mask, took it off after a moment, and without letting the man say a word, I immediately kissed him. The kiss was gentle. I wanted to enjoy every second of our intimacy, and Kakashi did not resist. On the contrary, he obediently answered. And when the air became catastrophically lacking, I pulled away at last, unable to restrain myself, slightly bit my lip. And only then did she speak. Kakashi, you came, in a whisper, so as not to wake up the house. I said happily. I promised you. My beloved answered me in the same whisper, enclosing my face in his palms. How are you, sunshine? It's already good. And unable to contain her emotions, she confessed, I love you, Kakashi. And I love you, Naruto, the man whispered with all his love, and just as he bent down for another kiss, someone's footsteps were heard in the corridor. A second later, the door to my room started to open. Kakashi, like a true ninja, reacted quickly and immediately hurried to jump out of the window. I didn't really have time to do anything. After a second, the door opened, and a sleepy Kushina appeared on the threshold. Looking around the room with a tenacious gaze, she asked quietly, "Naruto, who are you talking to?" "En Niscum." I immediately hastened to justify myself. It sounded pretty pathetic, and I could only be glad that my red face was not visible in the dark, as much as I was embarrassed right now that Aaa must have seemed to me. Ka-chan waved her hand in relief, and before I could be happy, she immediately added maliciously, "And tell your boy that you can talk during the day, but you need to sleep at night. Moreover, your missions will start tomorrow, you should not anger your sensei by being late on the first day." And said the last words, she left the room. I was trying not to laugh at the moment. If she only knew that boy. And as if to confirm my thoughts, this boy appeared in the room again. Approaching him in a tight, I noticed, "You heard." And having received his nod of agreement, she continued slyly, "I hope sensei won't be too angry tomorrow about my being late. What do you think?" "I don't think it will," Kakashi declared with laughter in his eyes. "But it's really time for you to go to bed. Will you stay with me?" I asked, making eyes. "Where am I going to go?" Jonin said resignedly. And without listening to the objections, he pulled me into bed. Sitting comfortably in his arms, I thought, "Mom is right, you need to get a good night's sleep, because training starts tomorrow." And the last thing I remember before I fell asleep was a light kiss on the top of my head and his quiet whisper, "Sleep Naru, and I'll be there." In the morning when I woke up, Kakashi was already gone, and this is not surprising. Looking at the clock and realizing that I was late, I jumped out of bed in a panic, managing to get tangled in the sheet and fall. A wonderful morning. You can't say anything. Quickly getting up from the floor, I started packing in a hurry. In my thoughts, I wondered, how could I oversleep? Why didn't anyone wake me up? Speaking of which, Kurama. You're such a flea-bitten fox, why didn't you wake me up? I shouted angrily, simultaneously pulling on the first things that got there. Surprisingly, it turned out to be a decent set. It consisted of a blue tunic, and orange half-shorts, and wristbands of the same color went with it. Am I an alarm clock for you? In the best traditions of offended innocence, the fox replied. But then he added conciliatingly, "Don't worry, Naru. Your sensei himself left only half an hour ago." I calmed him down, "He's always late himself." I grumbled. After making 2 familiar ponytails, I quickly went down. But the house was surprisingly empty. Only in the kitchen there was a carefully laid breakfast, which was accompanied by a note, "Be sure to eat." She went to get groceries. Mom. P.S. I hope you didn't oversleep. The last sentence caused me not an arbitrary smile. But, not wasting any more time, I devoured breakfast in record time, and hurried out the door. Running to the meeting place, I found a familiar picture. Near the Hokage residence stood the eternally imperturbable Sasuke, and Sakura, who was making eyes at him. Coming closer and greeting everyone, I began to wait for Sensei's arrival. Kakashi, as always, was late. But less than a couple of minutes later, Jonin himself arrived. "Good morning, everyone." And having received our sluggish nods in response, he continued, "Well, are you ready for your first mission?" At the last words, he looked at me with laughter in his eyes. And without waiting for an answer, I went to the residence. Having gone inside, and surprisingly quickly received the tasks, we started to complete it. Nothing complicated, the usual tasks of rank D. Having quickly completed it, the guys hurried to go home. Kakashi and I, under the approval of the fox, went to the training ground to train. And before we could start training, a very familiar type approached us. It was Naruto's local godfather, Orochimaru, nervously exchanging glances with Kakashi, which did not escape the snake's attentive gaze. I began to wait for further actions. But Orochimaru was in no hurry to speak, instead he stood intently studying us with his eyes. In the end, looking into my eyes, and apparently finding the right one, he said one thing, "Tell me," just like that, we were discovered by the campaign. Without getting hysterical, I decided to ask for advice to Kurama. What should we do? Tell him the truth. And without letting me object, he continued, he will understand. I had no choice but to trust Ku once again, and I began my story. She told me everything from beginning to end. I didn't forget to mention Orochimaru in that world either. From time to time, Kakashi supplemented, and in difficult moments for me, he supported me by taking my hand or hugging me. By the end of the story, when I couldn't hold back my tears, my godfather came up and just hugged me without words. After standing there for a few minutes and finally calming down, I asked only one thing: why? You are my goddaughter Naru, and whoever you were in the past, here you are like a daughter to me. Remember that. I'll remember. I nodded, and approached Kakashi with a happy smile. He immediately hurried to take my hand. After looking at our intertwined fingers, Orochimaru didn't say anything. Just hurried to clarify, I understand you came here to train. And when he saw our nods of agreement, he asked, do you mind if I help? My beloved and I exchanged glances, and I voiced our opinion, we will be only glad. I said, flashing a smile, and from that moment, hell began for me. The days passed in this mode, training, training and training again. But what about the missions, you ask? It's simple. Kakashi and I sent our clones on the mission, while we were training ourselves at that time. When our godfather also joined us, by the end of the training, I just wanted to howl. I felt so tired. But the training soon bore fruit. Over the past month, I have raised the level of ninjutsu and taijutsu. What to say, I even learned a few fuinjutsu seals. With the elements in general, a separate conversation. Yes, it is the elements. I had 2 of them. And if I was familiar with the wind, then I had to learn the element of water from scratch. Do not forget about the team. At least a couple of times a week, we held joint trainings. And they could already understand each other well. But back to the missions. After all, Tedzuna arrived in the village today. And this means that the mission in the country is waiting for waves. The morning started as usual, if not for one thing. And his name is Tedzuna. Yesterday, returning from another workout with Kakashi, I noticed a drunkard we know. And this means that the mission in the land of waves is already waiting. As in confirmation, it all started as then. Today we were given a mission to capture Tora, the cat of the wife of the daimyo of the land of fire. Kakashi and I had to cancel training and attend the mission in person, because then I had another task, much more difficult than this one, namely, to persuade my father to give us a mission of the C rank. All right, Daddy, wait. Naruto is coming for your soul. Eat, I wanted to say the mission. Go Databayo. To be honest, I was preparing for the worst. I thought the mission would have to be defended almost with tears. But surprisingly, everything went pretty smoothly. Going into the Hokage's office with the team and Kakashi to hand over the mission and return the cat to the rightful owner, I first looked around. In addition to Minato, who was sitting in a chair and sorting through some papers, there was also an old man third. He sat in the visitor's chair and invariably puffed on his pipe, talking about something with Irika-sensei standing next to him. Yumano, in turn, was holding a stack of some papers, probably at the signing of the Kage. And the picture was completed by Orochimaru's godfather. He was standing near the window, and as soon as we entered the office, he winked at me. I don't know what this snake is up to, and I don't want to know. Speaking of the third, it was old Sarutobi who sealed the fox into the local Naruto during Kurama's attack on Konoha. How he survived after that, no one ever understood. But people were undoubtedly glad of such a coincidence. And now he is legitimately the head of the elders. So let's go back to the office. Having successfully completed the mission, and having received payment, we began to wait for further instructions. Looking up from the papers, my father examined us carefully. And as if coming to some conclusions, he hurried to voice his decision. "I heard about the successes in your team." At these words, the father threw an eloquent glance at his godfather. "So that's what the snake was doing here. But in the meantime," he continued, "and I think you're ready for more, so I'm giving you a C-rank mission." After receiving a nod of agreement from Kakashi, and looking at our shocked faces, he finished, "You will have to protect one person. Here he is, by the way." As soon as Dad finished, the door swung open. A rather heavy man stumbled into the room. He looked the same as in the past, black eyes hidden behind glasses, a small beard, the same straw hat on his head, and the same bottle of sake in his hands. It was Tazuna in all his glory. "Who's that?" Having examined us, his eyes clouded from alcohol, he asked. "Kindergarten of some kind." This drunk snorted, and poking at me with his finger, he continued, "Especially the smallest one, with a stupid face." After his words, I could barely control myself, and the only thing that saved the man was that I knew that this would happen. But Kakashi didn't hold back on the campaign. After all, in the next second, a wave of pressing ki passed through the office. "Think what you're saying," Kakashi warned in a murderously quiet voice. And surprisingly, the father only nodded in the affirmative. There is no need to speak for the godfather, even I heard his threatening hiss. Everyone else just looked at Kakashi in surprise. And they can be understood, because the eternally calm, even you can say a non-selfish man, now looked more like a bubbling volcano. It's about to explode. Seeing such an agitated state of Kakashi, I took his hand as unobtrusively as possible in an attempt to calm him down. And it worked. He immediately relaxed, squeezing his hand a little in response. And in a more peaceful voice he finished, "We have to protect you, so you better watch your words." Nodding convulsively in response to Jonat's words, the man hurried to introduce himself. "I'm Tazuna, the architect. Specialist in the construction of bridges." And he finished more confidently, "I hope you will protect me well until I get to the land of waves and finish building there." After his speech, we received permission from the Hokage, hurried to take our leave. After all, tomorrow we will have a hard day. Early in the morning, when the sun had just appeared on the horizon, and the whole village was still asleep, the whole team was already standing at the entrance to Konoha, and waiting for their customer. Surprisingly, he was very late. Even Kakashi managed to come. But I didn't complain, because now I was standing in such warm, compared to the frosty coolness of the morning, embraces. Here we could afford it, because the team already knows everything, and the guards who should guard the entrance to the village were now snoring sweetly, buried in the table. I could have stood like this for an eternity, but now a familiar silhouette can be seen in the distance. And indeed, a few minutes later, a sleepy Tazuna came up to us, who was already holding a half-empty bottle of sake. "And when did he just have time?" I asked. Without breaking the embrace, I turned around in the ring of Kakashi's hands, leaning my back on his chest, and looked at the architect. Tazuna immediately blushed when he saw us in this position. I only smiled with satisfaction at this, still remembering his words yesterday, but still, turning my head, turned to Kakashi. "Everyone is assembled, I think we can perform." Having received your affirmative nod, I regretfully broke off my embrace, and with long strides headed for the exit of the village. Naruto, along with his team and Tazuna, were moving further away from Konoha. For several hours there had been only a dense forest around. Kakashi and I talked quietly and walked a little behind the others. And there was something to discuss, because there were a lot of battles waiting for us next. Having examined the situation from all sides, we came to the conclusion that it would be best not to change anything yet. And then Sakura asked a question about the 5 great countries: fire, wind, water, lightning and earth. Kakashi immediately began to talk about hidden villages and their kage, as well as the power of shinobi from different countries. That's how, talking, we came to a very familiar puddle. The wave of ki that came from her was hard not to notice. After briefly exchanging glances with Kakashi, and receiving a barely noticeable nod, I began to act. And I must say just in time. Before I could finish the technique, 2 shinobi were formed from a puddle. They were familiar to us ninjas who wielded a sharp chain. They, like last time, first of all rushed to Kakashi. And when they sort of chopped him up, in fact he left as a substitute, then I concentrated and finished the technique. They immediately fell to the grass as if knocked down. Now I had no more than a minute to have time to tie them up before the technique would subside. Sasuke and Kakashi helped me in this, firmly neutralizing negligent ninjas. Sakura, meanwhile, stood in front of Tazuna, ready to protect him at any moment. Fortunately, everything went well. But we know that this is not all. The next couple of days passed quietly, except for Tazuna's revelations. This happened immediately after the battle. My team and I had just moved away from the battle site when Tetsuna stopped us and finally decided to confess everything. Probably conscience woke up after what he saw, because Kakashi's malicious gaze could not affect him so much. Couldn't he? So, about Tadson. He told us everything, about Gato, who is hunting him, and about the poverty of the Wave Country. There was also a theater of one actor when he talked about his family. He calmed down only after he was convinced that we agreed to continue the mission, and after a decent sip of sake. Is he infinite or something? But let's go back to today. Now we were in the forest of the Land of Waves, where the fight with the goat should take place. And here he is, by the way. He stood in all his splendor, leaning on a huge sword. After looking at us with an uninterested look, he fixed his gaze on Kakashi. Oh, who do I see? The man pretended to round his eyes. This is the copying ninja Kakashi Hatake himself. He continued sarcastically. But then he added seriously, I'm sorry, but this old man is mine. Well, well. Kakashi drawled casually. Is it really the demon of the hidden mist itself that forgets Momochi? Mimicking Nuke Nin, the man chuckled. And then unconsciously pushed Naruto behind his back, more seriously continued, all back, he is not your equal. To fight him, I'll even have to use this. And removing the protector from the second eye, showing his Sharingan. And then the battle began. Everything happened as in the past. I must say Kakashi played his role perfectly. But I barely restrained myself, especially when I saw my beloved in a water prison. If not for Kurama's shout in the subconscious, I do not know how it would have ended. But it's all over now. Well, shall we go further? Approaching Kakashi, I asked. Let's move out, it won't be long. Sensei nodded affirmatively. But before he could take a step, he suddenly staggered. Emma, I think I overdid it after all. Kakashi said to me softly before he lost consciousness. All the way to Tazuna's house, I couldn't calm down. After all, Kakashi never came to his senses. And even though I knew he was just severely exhausted, I couldn't help myself. That's enough, Naru. Apparently from my high-strung state, even the fox felt uneasy. Nothing will happen to your Kakashi. And seeing that I'm still not calm, he suggested, well, if you want to try to cure him, I think your strength is already enough, and I'll share the chakra with you. Will it really work out? I asked hopefully. Of course, so calm down Naru. From the words of Ku, it became much easier for me. After all, if he said it would work out, then it will. I can cure Kakashi. I believe it, Dadabayo. As soon as we got to Tazuna's house, I decided not to delay and first of all help Kakashi. Tsunami, the builder's daughter, led us into the room without further ado, where I put Kakashi on a futon and started treatment. Sitting next to him, I put one hand on Sensei's chest, and took his hand with the other. Now I had to face the most difficult. Don't be a coward, Naruto. You will succeed. The fox encouraged me, and I didn't hesitate any longer. I started. Everyone else settled into the room, and began to closely observe my actions. And there was something to see. After all, in the next second, a golden glow began to emanate from my hands. It was Kurama's healing chakra. She began to envelop Kakashi, healing all the damage. For a moment my eyes flashed, and the pupil stretched vertically. But then abruptly everything stopped. The glow disappeared, and Kakashi breathed more calmly. He fell into a deep sleep. It was late in the evening. The house was silent. Everyone had been asleep for a long time. Through a light nap, I felt a hand on my cheek. Immediately opening my eyes, I saw Kakashi in front of me. He was half sitting leaning on one hand, and the other was gently stroking my cheek. Now we were in Kakashi's room. After all, after the treatment, I categorically refused to leave him, and I fell asleep holding his hand, and so, he finally woke up. Kakashi, you woke up, I breathed out happily, pressing my cheek to his hand. How are you feeling? Surprisingly well. How long have I been like this? Looking around, he asked. Just a few hours. And seeing the question in your eyes, she hurried to explain. It was Kurama who helped, and, at the end, I was embarrassed that, come here, Kakashi interrupted me, pulling me to his futon. You need to rest, too. Jonin explained his actions. After shifting a little, I settled comfortably in his arms, not arguing. In the end, I'm really very tired. The last thing I heard before I fell asleep was your quiet whisper thanks. The morning for me started with a light kiss on the cheek. Involuntarily smiling at such actions of my beloved, I opened my eyes and came across Kakashi's attentive gaze. Sleepy, with his hair disheveled after sleep, and a gentle smile on his lips now not hidden by a mask, he looked unacceptably cute. When he saw that I was awake, he leaned over whispering in my ear, good morning, the sun. Through each word, kissing, he descended lower and lower. But I wasn't in a hurry to kiss on the lips yet. I decided to correct this omission. And leaning closer she answered right on the lips, good morning, my love. Apparently with this, I finally broke the brakes. After all, in the next second, I was pressed against the futon, and my lips were insistently plugged with a kiss. I opened my mouth in surprise, which was immediately taken advantage of, deepening the already passionate kiss. When his tongue stroked the roof of my mouth and intertwined with mine, I couldn't help moaning. I felt good, and as much as I didn't want it to last forever, but we were interrupted. More precisely, we just heard a loud sound, and pulled away. As it turned out, it was Tazuna, who, from the picture he saw, probably hurried to faint. Yes, after all, they brought the man. Respectfully, the fox whistled in my head, but I didn't pay attention to it, because the rest of the inhabitants of the house hurriedly came running to the loud noise. Well, what can I say? Their reaction was priceless. Let's start in order. Sasuke and Sakura were used to it, so they reacted to it more calmly, just blushed together. But I'll tell you a secret, a blushing Uchiha is still a sight. But the Tsunami almost joined her father on the floor. And you can understand her, because she didn't know anything about our relationship, and then she caught such a picture, disheveled, and breathing heavily. Kakashi, fortunately, at least he managed to put on a mask, otherwise it would definitely not have been avoided. Now he was lying on his, for a moment, student, who looked no less disheveled, and blazed like May Rose. I think it's clear to a fool that they weren't playing cards here. And of course, as the apotheosis of Tadzin, who was lying in a shapeless heap somewhere on the floor. Yeah. It was a fun morning, you can't say anything. After the morning incident, we decided to run away to training without any agreement. And Tetsuna and her daughter need time to recover. Therefore, the team number 7 is in full force. Now we are training together in the forest. By the way, about training, this, as in the past, was a training to control your chakra. I had to learn how to walk on trees, but since I had learned this a long time ago, I could only look at the attempts of the team. From this, of course, an interesting case, I was distracted by the arrival of Kakashi. When he came up to me, he stopped and hesitated for a few seconds. This intrigued me a lot. What was going to happen so that Kakashi, always confident in himself, behaved like a genin before the first mission? Looking closer, I was surprised to notice even a blush, which the mask could not hide. But they didn't let me admire the look of the confused Kakashi for a long time. After all, he was finally able to collect his thoughts, and firmly looking into my eyes, offered, "Shall we take a walk?" Taking my hand, Kakashi asked as if that I could only nod at this, and to encourage my beloved, I squeezed his hand a little. He immediately relaxed at my actions, and sent me a grateful smile, led me along. That's when the fun began. After moving a decent distance from the rest of the team, we stopped in a small clearing. Everything around was dotted with white flowers that seemed to glow in the sun, and trees surrounded the clearing, as if closing it from the rest of the world. It looked just magical. But just why did we come here, Naruto? I want to tell you something. As if reading my thoughts, he spoke. Oh, something's going to happen now. The tailed one neighed inside me. And before I had time to think about what the fox meant, Kakashi continued, to do it more precisely, because I don't know how to speak beautifully, and I'm used to proving everything by deed. But know one thing, I love you, and whatever you decide now, I will always love you. And when I just wanted to ask what it means, he handed me a scroll. Interested in opening it, I fell into a deep shock. After all, it can't be what I think it is. Isn't that right? Looking into Kakashi's eyes, I was convinced that this was not a joke. Yes, this is the clan call of the Hatake clan. Jonin confirmed my thoughts. Well, a call and a call, you say, what's the big deal? And I'll tell you what. The clan call of Hatake, like any other clan jutsu, is absolutely secret and which is transmitted only among the members of the clan. And if I sign a contract, I automatically become part of the Hatake family, in this case Kakashi's fiancé. The catch is that after that, no one, not even my father, will be able to interfere with us anymore. I couldn't believe it. Probably all the emotions were written on my face, since Kakashi said, "It's true, Naru. I love you, and I don't want to hide anymore. Let everyone know that you are only mine, and I am yours." Therefore, swallowing, Kakashi continued, "Naruto Uzumaki, do you agree to become my wife?" Without hesitating, I overcame my excitement and gave my answer, "Yes, I agree." I replied with a slight tremor in my voice. And the next second she bit her finger, signing the contract. A dizzying kiss followed. It was the best moment of my life. From an overabundance of emotions, tears flowed from me. For the first time in this world, I cried, but it was tears of happiness. Even Kurama in his subconscious sighed happily, rejoicing for his Jinchuriki. The happy laughter of two lovers rang out in the clearing. And somewhere in the bushes at this time, a pair of strange eyes were watching them. Then the days passed quietly. Nothing else remarkable happened. It is possible to single out, perhaps, acquaintance with the entire pack of draft dogs. Oddly enough, it was with Pakun that I quickly found a common language. He was happy for Kakashi, and immediately accepted me as his new mistress. And now sometimes after a difficult workout, I could just call him to talk, and have a little rest. We talked about everything, including for the world of dog calling. But it was decided to visit him only before the final of the exams for Chunin. Otherwise, the days were spent guarding Tazuna and training. And now that very day has come. The day of the decisive battle with the bronze. Let's go, Dadabayo. It was decided in the morning that I would stay at home in case of an attack, and I would protect the tsunami with my son. As I remembered, it would happen closer to lunch, so I decided to get ready. But I was worried for nothing. Everything went as in the past, and quickly neutralizing the enemies, I ran to help the others. When I arrived at the bridge, I saw a painfully familiar picture. Through the dense fog, I could see the notorious ice prison. And through the connection of the call, I felt a pack of dogs, a little further away. Apparently everything is going according to plan in Kakashi. My thoughts were interrupted by Sasuke's loud shout. Apparently it's time to intervene. Well, are you ready? Let's show them Naru. The fox grinned bloodthirstily in my head. I even felt sorry for Haku. This time, I decided not to bring Sasuke to an imaginary death. And as soon as he has a Sharingan, immediately knock out the Haka. And that's why I'm now screaming loudly, jumped into the trap to Sasuke. Oh. I will remember his face forever. Kurama laughed loudly, and there was something to laugh about, because his face expressed utter shock, even more than after the incident in Tazuna's house. It was already a shame. But in the eyes it read, "Where did the idiot climb?" And as if in confirmation, Dobe, the brunette moaned in resignation. It was obvious that he was barely restraining himself from facepalm. And despite the numerous cuts, he smiled at me kindly. That's why you came here? Don't be afraid of the topic, I have a plan. She shouted proudly, thrusting her fist forward. And then quieter, so that only Sasuke could hear, we act according to the scheme A. After receiving his affirmative nod, we started at the same time. I wonder what kind of schemes. The fact is that during training we have developed some joint techniques, and there is a letter for each technique. Scheme A is a combination of elements. I amplify his fire with my wind, creating a killer technique. Only now I forgot that we are in a closed space. And now the fire was just flying at us. I was numb with fear. I needed to do something urgently, but nothing came into my head as evil. Naruto water. Use the element of water. Kurama's shout was heard through the noise in his ears. That's right, water. Thank you, Ku. And how did it not occur to me myself? But there was no time to think further, and I concentrated and surrounded us with water. I hope this will be enough. Phew. Another minute and we would have been fried. After all, the fire was so strong that even the ice mirrors floated. But this has its advantages. Sasuke was able to awaken Sharingan. And what if I immediately switched off? The main thing is the result. Meanwhile, I was trying to see through the thick steam what had happened to Haku, and here he is. When visibility cleared up a little, I saw Haku lying nearby. Yeah. After all, we went a little too far. We need to check if he is alive, because killing him was not part of our plans. When I got close, I turned him over on his back to check his pulse. Lowering my eyes lower, I was dumbfounded. And Haku, then we don't have Haku, right? The fox neighed loudly in his subconscious. And the size is nothing like that, bigger than yours. This tailed demon continued to mock, and all why? Because it couldn't possibly be a boy. At least his or her breasts are clearly female. Yes, what's wrong in this world? I cried out in my heart, but to reflect on the essence of being, I was not given by the newcomer, or rather the one who came to Haku opening her watery eyes. She immediately stunned me. It's you, isn't it? Was there in the clearing? I saw you and that secretive ninja back then. And without letting me get a word in, she continued, "Well, what are you going to do? Will you kill me? Isn't that what shinobi do?" "Of course not. What kind of nonsense are you talking about?" Apparently now it's my turn to shock her. "We didn't come here to kill you. You and Lisa are not our enemies. Then what?" She stammered in response. "We have one enemy, and that's Gato," I said harshly, but Kunoichi clearly wasn't going to calm down. Rising abruptly, she was about to dash into the fog. Grabbing her hand, I blocked her way to let go. She tried to break away, but the forces were clearly not equal. And then she decided to try another way. "Please, let go, there's a goat, I have to help him." And seeing my steadfastness, she desperately cried out, "They're killing each other right now." Indeed, at that moment there was a crackling sound from Kakashi's lightning, and then silence fell. "And now, look," I still said calmly, pointing in that direction. After a few seconds, the fog dissipated, revealing us alive and well, not counting scratches, Kakashi and Kazu. Releasing Haku, I immediately hurried to my beloved. Jumping on Kakashi, I squeezed him in my tight embrace. No matter how calm I looked, but inside I was still very worried about him. Without resisting, Kakashi just hugged me back. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a similar picture. Haku hugged Lisa sobbing, and it wasn't that he resisted much. So that's what it's all about. But our idyll was interrupted. A distinct sound of clapping was heard in the silence. Bravo, bravo. Now I'm going to cry with emotion. This suicide bomber turned out to be Gato, who stood and applauded, wiping invisible tears. Was there a bunch of mercenaries behind his back, who were probably supposed to scare us? Needless to say, I didn't even get off Kakashi. And when I also brazenly showed Gato my tongue, his face should have been seen. At such a childish trick of his beloved Kakashi, he only sighed. But the goat appreciated the joke, and now, in unison with the fox in my head, he was laughing at his former employer. Gato at first blushed, then turned purple, and at the end could not stand it, screamed, "Kill them! Kill!" Still, I would have blunted my leg for the sake of completeness. Well, just a child in hysterics, but no one allowed him to carry out his revenge. After all, screams were heard from the other side of the bridge. These were the angry villagers that little Inari had brought. After exchanging glances with Kakashi, we decided to keep up too, and having created 100 shadow clones, we rushed to the attack. Needless to say, it was a quick fight. But the most important thing is that Haku and Lisa are still alive. So our plan was a success. Databeo, it's been 2 weeks since the day of the fight. And exactly 3 months of our stay in the land of waves. The bridge has been completed and it will continue to be called Naruto. Which I was secretly very happy about. We did not say goodbye without tears. It was especially a pity to part with Haku, with whom we had become very close during this time. Yes, and I managed to forget to breed for training. After all, he has a native element of water and he was able to teach me a lot. By the way, he and Haku will stay in the land of waves. The villagers didn't mind the 2 strong ninjas who would be able to protect them if anything happened. Therefore, we left the village with a light heart. Personally, I will hope that they will be fine. Haku even promised that I would be the godmother of the first child. Just as Shich. It's a secret. Well, Konoha, wait. We're going home. Databeo. After a couple of days, we finally got home. Kakashi, I asked you not to advertise our new status yet. But, as they say, chance intervened. It happened on the day of the return. Kushina, on the occasion of the completion of the first serious mission of her daughter, as she herself said, decided to arrange a small festive dinner. Naturally inviting not only my team, but also Mina's team. And here let's take a closer look. As it turned out, Mina got into the team of the famous Green Beast of Konoha. As in my world, it consisted of Lee, Niji, Guy, and Tenten. But since Mina graduated from the academy a year earlier, due to an odd number of students, for Shinobi got into one team. Well, Guy, known for his strength of youth, just couldn't miss it, but back to dinner. It all started quite peacefully. We met, had a little chat. Guy, in his repertoire, tried to draw Kakashi into an argument. Niji was talking to Sasuke about something, Mina was arguing with Tenten, and sometimes Sakura got into their argument. But Lee surprised, "Tell me, why do I need this?" Instead of pestering Sakura and confessing his love to her, which, to tell the truth, I expected, he chose me as the object of his sighing. Me. Do you understand? And I even caught a glimpse of Guy sighing pathetically to Kakashi. Which one of them will make a pair? So keep it up. The power of youth boils in you. These words made me pale. I was scared to look at Kakashi at all. But Mom saved the situation. Seeing my condition, she hurried to call everyone to the table. Then the dinner proceeded calmly, if not for Mina's looks. She literally devoured Kakashi with her eyes. My Kakashi. The fox dissuaded me from immediate sisterhood. Calm down, Naru, let him watch, he's only yours anyway. You're right. I exhaled slowly, and tried to enjoy dinner, but what happened next just pissed me off. This little nit, there's no other way to say it, as if accidentally turned the juice on Kakashi's t-shirt. And now, despite the protests of Inogo, I climbed to wipe it. In fact, she just shamelessly groped my fiancé. Is this normal in your opinion? I hissed no worse than a cat. To which I was calmly answered, what did you want? She herself suggested hiding the relationship, and now suffer. And while Kurama was talking, Mina crossed all boundaries. She literally almost hung on to Kakashi. Everyone present watched this picture with interest, even the parents didn't mind the campaign. But my team looked with horror at what they understood to be a suicide. After all, they knew what kind of relationship we had with Kakashi, and now they wisely moved away and expected further actions from me. And I didn't keep myself waiting. In the next second, a murderous key wafted from me. Jumping up abruptly, I looked only at Mina and said, "Take your hands off." I hissed slowly, barely restraining my anger. But she didn't seem to hear me, continuing her work. Kakashi looked at me with pleading eyes. And I decided, stop groping my fiancé. After my words, there was silence at the table. Everyone looked from me to Kakashi in shock. He took advantage of the general confusion, got out from behind the table. And coming up, he took my hand, as if confirming my words. The father woke up first. He frowned at us, and fixed his gaze on Kakashi. Glaring at him with his eyes, he met only a determined look in response. The sight of Kakashi said that he was ready to defend his own to the end. My parents only exchanged glances at this, and after receiving a nod from my father, my mother slyly looked into my eyes and asked, "Does it mean a boy?" And after a few seconds, our common laughter sounded at the table. Men only sighed heavily at such an outburst of their loved ones. Well, what can I do? Uzumaki, we are such databayo. It's been a month since that dinner incident. The conversation with the parents took place, but everything was surprisingly good. Probably Kushina tried here, because Minato didn't even have time to make a sound, as he got a frying pan on the head. So with the light hand of the bloody habanero, we received the blessings for marriage. And now, without hiding from anyone, they could walk around Konoha holding hands. The first couple of times we were followed with sidelong glances. After all, we have a difference of 10 years, and then we got used to it. And you can't say now that I'm only 16, I looked at all 18 if not more. The fox did not lie, and over the past 6 months I have really grown up a lot. So that's what I was talking about there. A month has already passed, and Chunin Shuriken is due to take place soon. And this means that I will be able to see Gaara. In my world, he became my older brother whom I could always rely on, and in this world I will do everything to find my Nii-san again. So now I'm walking around Konoha, following the trail of the Shikaku chakra. Naturally, Sakura got involved with me again. Over the past month, we have become good friends, or rather, she herself realized that I do not encroach on her Sasuke-kun, and began to spend more time with me. The closer we got to Shikaku, the more frantic Kurama became. When I asked him what was wrong with him, he replied that he just missed me a lot. Yeah, well, that's how I believed it. Probably hiding something again, his face was too happy. Every time the conversation went behind Gaara. Someone's cry pulled me out of my thoughts. Sakura and I ran in that direction without saying a word. Turning the corner, a familiar picture appeared before us. The big guy Kankuro was holding Konohamaru by the breasts, and his friends Udon and Moegi were huddled behind. Having decided to stop this circus, especially since I felt a painfully familiar chakra next to me, enough, let him go. I say coldly, looking directly at Kankuro. And only now I felt a familiar response. That's how we used to communicate between Jinchuriki. This method was invented once by Gaara, Mynii-san. So that's why the fox was silent. It can't be, and as if in confirmation, a quiet voice was heard behind Kankuro and Temari. Stop, Kankuro. As always, he said calmly. And looking into my eyes, he added slyly, you'd better not make her angry. To such a remark, I just sighed nostalgically, looking at the guy with all my eyes. It was the guy. He looked about 18 years old now, probably like me, because of the chakra. He grew up, tall, fit, with red long hair that was now gathered in a high ponytail. Only the deep turquoise eyes and the kanji, love, on his forehead remained unchanged. But we were distracted from looking at each other by the already forgotten Kankuro. Gaara, do you know her? Not culturally poking in my direction, he asked. After this question, I noticed how sparks danced in Gaara's eyes. I know that look. After such a look, something interesting always began. After all, the quiet and calm Gaara also liked to joke sometimes. Only here his dirty tricks were large-scale, as they say, rarely but aptly. Something's going to happen now. The fox said, rubbing his paws in anticipation. And he was not mistaken. How can I not know my little Amato? He asked Kankuro in mock surprise. I would have spread my hands. Well, nothing, you can play this game together. And without paying any attention to the fucking looks of Sandstones and Sakura, she joyfully rushed to Gaara. Ni-san. I yelled loudly in his ear on purpose. Gaara only laughed at this trick, which literally horrified his family, and pressed me closer to him. 1-1 Naruto, he whispered softly in my ear. And then he continued seriously, we will have a lot to discuss, and I couldn't disagree with that. But there will still be time for this, and now I could just be a little glad that my brother is with me. 3 days have passed since the conversation with Gaara. And today the first stage of the exam should take place. But it wasn't him who occupied my thoughts. I was remembering our conversation with Nii-san. That same evening, after an enchanting meeting on the street, we went to one of the old landfills where we managed to talk in private. More precisely, I just plunged into Gaara's consciousness, deciding that they definitely wouldn't be able to eavesdrop on us there. And there was something to talk about. First I told my story in this world. About the fact that Kakashi moved with me, I also did not forget to mention. After demanding answers from Gaara, I was interested in one question: how did he end up in this world? And what he said just pissed me off. As it turned out, after my heroic death and Kurama's death, respectively, the elders of the villages, and Sand in particular, decided to eliminate, as they said, the threat in the person of Gaara and the remaining Jinchuriki along with their Biju. Thereby establishing a balance, as they considered the whole shinobi world. Gaara didn't know if they managed to destroy the others, because he was eliminated first. He was so depressed by my death that he could not immediately notice the trap set for him. And when I noticed, it was already too late. That's how he ended up in this world. After all, Shikaku, like Kurama, did not want to part with his Jinchuriki, and through the connection Biju was able to move him here. Then I cried a lot listening to all this. And even now, remembering, tears welled up in my eyes. Kurama's scream brought me to myself. Stop whining. Are you Uzumaki or what? That's why I love Kurama, he never lets me fall apart. You're right, Ku, I'm sorry. I apologized quietly, and finished more joyfully. Naruto Uzumaki is ready for exams. Are you with me? Where am I going to go? The fox moaned in resignation. When I came to the academy, the first thing I found was my team. As it turned out, they, along with Guy's team, were already waiting at the audience we needed. I was the only one missing. Ignoring their irritated glances and not listening to Sakura's quiet lamentations, I happily greeted everyone. Hello people. She also waved her pen. Well, what are we standing for? Who are we waiting for? Let's go or they'll start without us, Dadabayo. And under the friendly cry of Naruyuto, she slipped into the audience. When they flew in after me, all the angry ones, even the eternally calm Sasuke and Neji, were throwing lightning bolts. I just laughed. From my immediate reprisal, I was saved by the arrival of the examiner. It was the notorious Marino Ibiki. Quickly calming the audience and seating everyone in their seats, he hurried to announce the first task. Nothing new, all the same 9 tests that I easily wrote this time. Which undoubtedly caused a surprised look from Marino. The rest of the time I spent in a mental discussion with Gaara, who, like me, did not bother with the tests. And when we had to voice the 10th question, I couldn't stand another joke. Shikaku, I'll tell you another prankster, laughed at the whole audience. Their faces needed to be seen. With Ibiki, it is generally possible to paint a picture. Another driven man in your piggy bank, Naruto. Kurama drawled happily from the remark of my Biju. Gaara could not stand it anymore, and joined my laughter. This finally finished off the already shocked ninjas. And imagine, there is an exam, everyone is nervous, worried, and then, amid the silence, the hysterical laughter of 2 genins sounded almost simultaneously, who, moreover, are sitting at different ends of the audience. That's how they know that we can communicate mentally. Presented? Is their shock understandable now? But the first, oddly enough, Ibiki came to his senses, and in order to intimidate the genins who were having too much fun in his opinion, he decided to ask his 10th question. Needless to say, I just yawned at his tediousness. And how could I have been afraid of this in the past? Well, he released some of his ki to intimidate, and what? Yes, compared to Shikaku and Kurama, his ki is not even worth it, so, after repeating my last feint about the way of the ninja, I successfully passed the test, and now we are waiting for the second stage and the Forest of Death. Well, let's go. Dadabayo. When I entered the Forest of Death, I was very pleased. And all why? Yes, because I did see my second godfather. It was this morning that Jiraiya arrived in Konoha, and not alone, but in the company of Tsunade-bachan. As it turned out, they were supposed to arrive by the first stage. But, as they said, they were delayed by urgent matters. I know their business, probably stuck again, one in the baths, and the second in the local casinos. In general, they were noticeably late, arriving just before the second task. That's why they didn't give us much to talk about. We only had time to congratulate you on passing the first stage and to pass a small present for passing the second. A cool present, I must say. It turned out to be a multifunctional first aid kit by Irionin with personal designs by Tsunade, which could not be more suitable for the Forest of Death. They also gave a gift from Kushina and her father. They were mostly sealed scrolls with provisions, and knowing my mother for no less than an army of supplies. But the scroll from Kakashi warmed me the most. Even at the entrance, despite the prohibition of the meeting, because relatives are forbidden to patrol and influence the course of the exam, he was able to give me his personal set of weapons. And he kissed me for good luck and left to wait for me in the tower. Their concern moved me to tears. After all, no one had ever worried about me before. So what was loaded as a war? They are worried after all, and I will tell you that it is very pleasant, and now I just can't not pass the exam. I will pass this forest. I promised Dattebayo. Everything went smoothly as I said. Now no one wanted to capture Sasuke, so we quickly found the second scroll and went straight to the tower. On the way, we met Guy's team, and it became even more fun to go. Constant shouts about the power of youth brightened up the road well and raised my already excellent mood. And when we met Gaara on the way to the tower, I was ready to just dance with happiness, because Shikaku and Kurama are just a bunch of jokes. That's how our way passed by a friendly and cheerful company constantly joking and having fun. So, I didn't notice how we managed to reach our destination. And in the tower we were met by none other than my beloved Kakashi. Congratulating the team on passing the second stage, he hurried to take me in his arms. I just sighed blissfully at this, getting comfortable. After all, soon I won't be able to rest. There are still qualifying fights ahead. Dattebayo. 3 days of our stay in the tower have passed. The next stage of the selections, namely the fights, should take place today. I was a little nervous, because it's unclear who the draw will choose this time. In the past, I came across Kiba, and here I didn't know who to expect. But I felt that this time I would find adventures for myself on my own. In general, you understand. And this time my premonitions did not deceive me, because I will be the first to fight this time. And a drum roll. With a mine. A mine. Of course, I understood that we could not avoid a fight, but I hoped at least for the final. Don't think that I'm afraid or something, just to immediately show my level of strength. Nothing, Naruto, let's get out of it. Madara is not your sister after all. Kurama tried to cheer me up. And I must say he did it, so I gathered myself, and under the approving gaze of Kakashi, jumped into the arena. It's better to give up right away, loser. It shouted out to me. A miracle, there was a moment of silence after these words. In their thoughts, Kurama and Shikaku already felt sorry for this suicide. I'm kidding, they didn't regret it. Such mats, I have not heard from them yet. But I must say it had its effect, and I decided to start the fight in a good mood. Well, how to start? They did not have time to give the go-ahead to the beginning, as the mine was already lying in a blackout. Yes. I have never seen such a shock on my father's face. Another -1 guy. I adore you, Naruto. The fox purred in his subconscious, under the consonant humming of Shikaku, but that's not all. Deciding to finish off the already shocked audience, she added, and you didn't have to make me angry. I snorted loudly to the whole arena, and proudly raising my head jumped into Kakashi's already open arms. And leaning her back on his chest, she looked at the examiner with a challenge. He even spat out his eternal Senbon from his mouth out of surprise, but he still defended the victory to me. And I, with a feeling of complete satisfaction, allowed myself to relax in such reliable hands of my beloved, celebrating my victory, albeit small. Then the fights went as expected, and the previous lineup reached the final, but the draw let me down again. Instead of Niji, who got Sasuke this time, I have to fight, as you already understood, with Gaara. Yes. Well, we'll give everyone the heat. The battle of the two Jinchuriki promises to be spectacular. Databayo, a couple of days passed after the second stage. Mina tried to stay away from me after that fight. But to be honest, I was not up to her. After all, today Pakken has to take me to the world of dogs. And now I was standing near the gate to Konoha, after saying goodbye to everyone, waiting for the arrival of Pakken. I was very nervous. Kurama, as always, brought me out of this state. Don't worry Naru, you've already been to other worlds, you've even managed to become a Sannin, so why be nervous? His words really made it easier, but not completely. And apparently seeing my condition, he decided to make me laugh a little. You better remember the faces of the legendary Troika when they saw your call. Oh. Kurama's words made me laugh involuntarily, remembering that situation. It happened the day after the second stage. Mom, as always, arranged a family dinner. Our legendary Trinity was also present at it. Everyone was joking. The godparents sometimes quarreled with each other, for which they immediately received from Tsunade, and in between the conversation turned to the call. The snake just couldn't miss the opportunity to mock Jiraiya. After all, Toad Sannin was not aware of my engagement yet. Well, Kakashi is sitting at dinner, so he's a former student, and how would the family not? So, taking advantage of Jiraiya's ignorance, this snake decided to play a little joke. GG, what do you think, whose call will Naruto choose, mine or yours? Orochimaru-san suggested, laughing softly that, by the way, for the draft, Naruto will of course choose Toad's. Like her father before her, yes Minato? While casting an eloquent glance at his father. Dad only looked away guiltily at this, ruffling his already disheveled hair. Oh! How could I forget? The snake cried out picturesquely, putting his hand to his face. And then he continued to mock, she already has a draft. Will you show it to us, Naruto-chan? Yes. Show me. Like a little child, Jiraiya was whining, thus, without knowing it, supported the snake's game. At this, Orochimaru only flashed his eyes in anticipation, shifting his gaze from me to Kakashi. Here, bastard. But there was nothing to be done, and I got up from the table under the probing gaze of my godparents. After hesitating a little more, but receiving an encouraging nod from her beloved, she sighed and activated the technique, summoning technique. From my hands seals went on the ground, and soon Pakken appeared out of the smoke. The faces of Jiraiya and Tsunade, you had to see. Seriously, it was something with something. Even Orochimaru couldn't stand it and didn't laugh culturally. And all why? Yes, because at first it was a shock, then as they realized, and this could be understood by their glances between me and Kakashi, understanding appeared on their faces, and then Tsunade, like Mom, once happily squeaked and hurried to strangle me in her arms. Her lamentations that they say how the girl has already grown up, I will remember for a long time. But Jiraiya, as always, distinguished himself, just took and fainted. The voice of Pakken who appeared brought me out of my memories. Well, are you ready to explore the world of dogs? Ready. Let's go, Databayo, and with a soft rustle, we disappeared into a cloud of smoke. The next thing I saw when I opened my eyes was a huge island. We were right in the center of the square. Different dogs were scurrying here and there were a bunch of other houses around. But they didn't let me look at the world around me any further, they led me straight to the largest building in this place. It was a kind of temple, as I understood it was there that the elder was. Entering inside, a huge white dog appeared in front of me. He looked older and wiser than the others, and he exuded great strength from him. And only then did it hit me. So that's why, White Fang. That's the child, my name is so because of my color. Did I say that out loud? At my remark, he just laughed. Then he abruptly became serious, carefully examined me from head to toe. He asked, "So you are the female of baby Kakashi?" And as if he had calculated something, he shook his head approvingly. Good choice. I wasn't shocked enough by his words. No, not like that, shocked. As if he had inspected the goods. I already wanted to be outraged, and I don't care what the elder is, but as it turned out, he hasn't finished yet. Don't be offended with me, child. I couldn't put Kakashi in the wrong hands. After all, he's part of my pack, and he's become like a son to me. But I liked you, and that's why. I accept you into the pack, and I will teach you myself. It was with these words that my daily hell began. But Uzumaki, don't give up, Databayo. Because, don't give up. 3 months of my stay in the draft world have passed. In the real world, only a month has passed. As they explained to me later, this island is located in a certain spatial pocket, therefore time goes differently here. But that's not the point now. Through long and hard training, I was able to achieve a lot. Here will be a surprise for everyone at the finals. Speaking of which, I'm late. Don't get angry, Naru, you're doing everything in time. We'll arrive right at the beginning. You better make sure you haven't forgotten anything. As always, the fox hastened to reassure me. I've already checked everything 100 times, but thank you for reminding me. You're welcome, the tailed one growled sarcastically, and then grumbled, move better, otherwise we'll really be late. Without arguing, I broke the seal and disappeared into the smoke of displacement. And in my head I heard the words of the elder, which he said to me at parting. You are a strong female, but don't forget that everyone has weaknesses. The main thing is to take care of yourself and your still small family. I'm thinking here, what did he mean by saying, about yet? And Kurama? You are such a fool in some matters, Naru. But never mind, there will be a surprise for you. The fox giggled nastily. Well, okay, I'll find out for myself later. In the meantime, the Chunin Shuriken finale is waiting for me. Well, wait for Konoha. Naruto Uzumaki is coming. Having moved, the first thing I could see was a stadium full of people. As it turned out, I was transported directly to the arena. And as Kurama said, they managed to get right to the beginning. Kakashi and Sasuke appeared next to me in the same vortex of movement. When Sasuke saw me, he nodded, and Kakashi smiled, which was visible even through the mask. Suppressing the urge to immediately hug him, I have become too emotional lately. Instead, I began to listen carefully to the examiner. Haven't you figured it out yet? The fox moaned in despair at my thoughts. What are you talking about? I don't like it when someone speaks in riddles. Never mind. Better listen to the examiner, the first fight has been announced. And the truth is, while I was having discussions with Kurama, the Genma examiner of this test managed to announce the alternation of fights. At first, as in the past, Shikamaru and Temari went, then Kankuro and Shino, and Gaara and Sasuke and Neji left us for a snack, so to speak. The first fight was announced. Only Shikamaru and Temari remained in the arena. Everyone else hurried to go to a specially allocated room to watch the fights from there. Everything seemed to be fine. I even calmed down a little in Kakashi's arms, but still my premonition just screamed that something would go wrong. But surprisingly, the fight went as in the past. Temari defeated the lazy Shikamaru, and I finally relaxed. As it turned out later, in vain, but now it's not about that. Then Kankuro and Shino were called. To the surprise of the first one, he lost. After all, the Aburams keep a lot of secrets. And now it's my turn. Gaara and I discussed our fight in advance. Everything should be spectacular and look more plausible, but in the end it should be a draw. After entering the arena, my anxiety only intensified. And apparently feeling the same, Gaara warned, "Something is coming up, be careful Amato, Shikaku is not calm in the morning. I also have a bad feeling about Nii-san, and now it's literally going through the roof. We are still acting according to Plan A." Before he could finish, explosions sounded around. The residents immediately became alarmed. Gaara and I approached each other without talking and began to wait back to back for an attack, and the enemies did not take long to wait. People in such familiar black robes with red clouds literally jumped into the arena. Of the Nukanons I know, Haiden and his partner Kakuzu were here, and the notorious Fuse Deidara, this time paired with Kisame. But what is surprising is that this gang was led not by Nagato, but by a completely familiar Madara. But why are they here? Yes, and all together, but soon I got answers to all my questions. That nice to meet Naruto-chan again. Madara literally purred to me. And when I noticed Gaara, I fell into ecstasy at all. Oh. There are also one-tailed Jinchuriki, if I'm not mistaken. Gaara? Naruto, I do not know how to tell you. In short, this is Madara from your world. Literally growled the last sentence of the fox, and while I was realizing what Kurama was telling me, the enemy was not asleep. He took advantage of our confusion with Nii-san and tried to attack. Fortunately, the sand protection managed to save us. Somewhere in the stands, there was a shout and the sounds of a battle. Apparently one of our people is trying to break through. And it wasn't just me who realized that. Go distract them. Don't let anyone get in here. Madara gave the order. And a second later we were alone in the arena. At such a time, Madara grinned and whispered in anticipation, "And I'll deal with you myself, Nii-san, I need some time." "Understood," was the laconic reply, and without waiting any longer, I closed my eyes and concentrated on folding the necessary seals. I don't know how much time has passed, because when I opened my eyes, Gaara was already very exhausted. And now another strong blow breaks through his sandy defense and simply throws off the already unconscious body of my Nii-san, but the enemy is not tired of the campaign at all. At least his next words sounded very convincing. "And now you." Pointing at me with his finger, Madara proclaimed. "Yes, Naruto, you were able to kill me once. And now I will return the favor." How could you survive?" I asked, trying to stall for a little more time. "That sly fox, are you trying to stall for time?" He saw through me right away. "But I'll tell you. And I didn't survive." And seeing my confusion, he continued, "The body died, but the soul wanted to live. By the way, I owe my stay here to you. Yes, don't be surprised, because it's your technique, or rather the fox technique moved me here. And while he was leading his certainly interesting monologue, I was able to accumulate enough natural chakra to enter Sannin mode. It was the first technique I learned in the conscription world. After all, to create the next one, I will need all the power of the sand chakra. Berserker technique. Yes, it was this technique that was the strongest available to me so far. Its essence is that I transform the entire chakra in the body into an aggressive one. Strength and speed are growing, reflexes are off the scale in general. But there is also a minus: I stop feeling pain. And if I am seriously injured, I may not notice it in time. Meanwhile, Madara was in a kind of shock. Well, yes, he got used to my toad hypostasis of the sage, and here it is, and he has something to be surprised about. My figure seemed to have doubled, my hair changed color from gold to silver, a tribute to the Hatake family. My eyes also acquired a deeper blue shade, and when I added the Kurama chakra, it was time to hide altogether. The wave of ki that came from me literally pinned Madara to the ground. But I didn't hesitate any longer, and having created a wind shuriken, I attacked. The fight didn't last long. Unable to resist my ki, Madara became almost helpless. And after the first strong blow, he just fainted. The last thing I heard before I collapsed from exhaustion were Kurama's words, yes. One more. After all, you overdid it, Naruto. And already falling into the darkness, I felt such familiar hands pick me up. I came to myself from loud voices. One voice was Kakashi, and the other belonged to Tsunade Bachan. So I'm probably in the hospital. Somehow opening my eyes, I was able to verify my assumption. Noticing that I woke up, they immediately rushed to me to, "How are you, Naru?" The worried face of my beloved appeared in front of me to, "Yes, everything is fine with her. Tell him, Naruto, to calm down already." And muttered softly, "Sitting here scares me, doctors. You need to rest yourself," and he's still sitting next to you. By the way, it's already the second day. From what I heard, I didn't know what to do. Whether to be touched that he is so worried, or on the contrary to scold. But having decided to follow Tsunade's advice and calm him down first, I'm fine. And seeing his skeptical expression, I pulled him to me and hugged him, whispered in his ear, "Well, really, I feel just fine. That I was really scared for you. When I saw you fall, at first I thought you were dead. That I've lost you again." His voice was so lost, and his hugs were strong, that I immediately realized, he was afraid, believed, loved, but our revelations were interrupted by a delicate cough. "Of course I understand reunions and all that, but you can't strain yourself." Tsunade pointed her finger at me, and it was exactly her. And then nodding at Kakashi, subtly hinted, "Yes, and you need to rest. So, it's time for you. And I will follow Naruto myself." While she was talking, she managed to lead him to the door. And before slamming the door in front of him, she added, "We need to talk girl talk, and you come in the evening." Kakashi only had time to nod goodbye to me when the door was slammed in front of him. But when Tsunade turned around, it was time to run. "Well, now let's talk," and her smile did not bode well for me. "And when did you think to tell everyone?" Tsunade asked, leaning towards me. "Say what?" In complete misunderstanding of what is happening, I answered the question with a question that, "Come on, tell your Tsunade, when did you have time?" But seeing all the misunderstandings, too, she added in shock, "You mean you didn't know?" "Didn't know what?" "So will you finally tell me what's going on here?" I shouted, no longer holding out. "Well, what kind of people? First Kurama speaks in riddles, now Bachan is hiding something. It feels like everyone knows except me." At my words, she somehow awkwardly scratched the top of her head, and after thinking for a minute said, "Well, have you already had something with Kakashi?" She began from afar. Not expecting such a question, I even choked on air. Memories immediately surfaced in my mind. This something happened before I left for the world of dogs. Then Mom arranged another family dinner to say goodbye, so to speak. That evening, a strong thunderstorm began, and Kushina insisted that Kakashi stay with us, arguing that there was nothing for almost a son-in-law to get wet in the rain. They made a bed naturally in the guest bedroom, but when did it stop me? And I waited until everyone was asleep and made my way to his room. As it turned out, Kakashi was already waiting for me. I will say one thing, it's good that I installed a barrier against eavesdropping. Otherwise we'd wake up the whole house. This is an irreplaceable Fuinjutsu thing. And now, remembering this, I have already begun to understand what Tsunade is driving at. Probably my reddened face said it all for me. Because she continued, "I see what happened. You mean that," I said a little shocked, to the mental accompaniment of the fox, "you finally got it." And she finished more confidently, "I'm pregnant. The term is 3 months, congratulations." Happily squeezing me in her arms, congratulated Tsunade. And only after her words, I began to remember some moments. All those ailments in the morning, nausea, severe fatigue, my mood swings, yes, even the way my chakra has been reaching out to Kakashi lately. And how did I not guess earlier? Tsunade's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. I take it Kakashi doesn't know. And seeing my guilty face, she suggested, "No one knows, I'll tell you everything." Raising my hands in a conciliatory manner, I continued, "Today, that's good." Clapping her hands, Tsunade got up, and already at the very door she added cunningly, "I'll be the baby's godmother." And it's not up for discussion. Without waiting for my answer, she hurried out of the room. That's why, tell me why I promised that I would tell everything myself? Who only pulled me by the tongue? I have no idea where to even start, and now, several hours have passed, Kakashi was standing in the doorway, and I didn't even have time to think of anything. But there was no point in dragging it out anymore, and I decided to act as always, in the Uzumaki way. Kakashi, attracting his attention, I immediately blurted out, "I'm pregnant." Well, what can I say? At least I didn't faint, and thanks for that. I haven't seen such a face on Kakashi yet. He seemed to have frozen like a monument to himself, but after a minute a blissful smile spread on his face. "I'm going to be a dad," still with the same stupid smile, he whispered, and coming up to me gently kissed me. "Thank you, my Sunday." After saying the last words, he still fainted. And she drove him. Well done, Naruto. A real Uzumaki. Kurama neighed approvingly. That's what I call it," I confessed. More than a year has passed since that day. A lot of things have happened during this time. Let's start with my pregnancy. After learning this news, I still brought Minato to faint. But from Mom, Kakashi ran away for a long time all over the village. Furthermore, as it turned out, Jinchurika's pregnancy lasts not 9 but 12 months. Yes, almost a year of torment for my father and Kakashi. After all, a pregnant Uzumaki, I'll tell you, it will be worse than Madara. What I just didn't want, and herring with watermelon, and ramen with strawberries at night and even in a thunderstorm, memories. But Kakashi just loved my tricks, fulfilled any request with such zeal and joy. What can I say? Really an exemplary husband and father, and the reward after so much suffering was a little silver-haired boy. Our son, in Konoha, life does not sleep either. During this time, a couple of new couples have formed. If Lee and Tenten were quite expected, even I somehow got used to Shikamaru with Ino, but what can I say? When the timid Hinata announced her engagement to Niji, I was less surprised than what Mina had done. After all, we were born to be related to the red-eyed, as the Uchiha called Kurama. And no, it's not Sasuke, who quite peacefully got together with Sakura. It's Itachi. Yes, the same Itachi Uchiha. Imagine my shock when I found out about it. And not only mine, I thought Dad would need to be pumped out. After all, bringing people to Uzumaki is in the blood. But what about Madara and his notorious gang, you ask? And nothing will happen to them. They are now living in Konoha, being re-educated under the supervision of the legendary Troika. They are ruffling the nerves of the already twitchy Hokage. This is after my pregnancy. And I'll tell you, they're quite happy. A light kiss on the neck brought me out of my thoughts. Someone's familiar arms wrapped around her waist, and a quiet whisper sounded above her ear. What is Neru thinking about? Just like that. That's how I think everything has changed. I would never have believed that I would have a husband, a family, and a quiet life. And turning around in the hands of my beloved, and it was Kakashi, I whispered, "I love you. And I love you." Bending down, he sealed a gentle kiss on my lips. Picking me up in his arms, Kakashi carried me to our bedroom. Putting me down on the bed, he whispered conspiratorially, "How about a daughter?" Of course, and Kushina took the baby. does she need to have a little fun with her grandson? And his eyes flashed with anticipation. We have the whole day at our disposal, and already drowning in a passionate kiss, I thought only one thing: thank you, Kurama. Thanks for everything. That's how this story ended. But another, no less happy, long life began. A new life. That's the end of it.